Imagine standing on cold stone, the stars above, and silence all around. This is the castle, and tonight, it's your refuge. Have you ever wondered how these towering fortresses held off entire armies? What secrets were hidden behind their thick stone walls? Welcome to another journey through time, a gentle unraveling of history meant to guide you into peaceful rest. Tonight, we explore the quiet strength of medieval castles, built not just for battle, but for survival, shelter, and everyday life. But before we pass through the heavy wooden doors, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, only if you truly enjoy these sleepy stories from the past. Leave a comment too. Where are you listening from tonight, and how is your day winding down? Now, let's drift into a world of moats and towers, of whispered winds through arrow slits, and footsteps on ancient stone. These castles were more than defense. They were homes, havens, and history carved in stone. And tonight, they welcome you in. Before we begin, just take a moment to settle in. Maybe dim the lights, draw the curtains, and feel the calm of the night surrounding you. This isn't about speed or urgency. This is a gentle wander through time, where each stone, each corner of the castle, each strategy was carefully placed to protect life within its fortress. You're not just a listener tonight, you're a guest in these castles, wrapped in history's embrace, ready to drift deeper into the calm. Now, with that, let's step through the heavy wooden door of the castle, where history meets serenity, and the sound of invaders is but a distant echo. As the sun dips beneath the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of gold and lavender, we find ourselves standing at the edge of a medieval castle. The stones beneath our feet are worn, yet sturdy, carrying the weight of centuries, whispering tales of valor, hardship, and quiet moments behind its towering walls. Picture it, the high walls of the castle, etched with history, standing firm against the backdrop of an evening sky. It's not just any building, it's a fortress designed to protect, to shelter, and to withstand the chaos of the world outside. Welcome to the world of medieval castles. Tonight, we'll be drifting through these stone strongholds, gently exploring how they were built to defend against invaders, how they became symbols of power and security, and, perhaps most intriguingly, how they offered peace to those within them. Castles were more than just grand buildings. They were the lifeblood of the medieval world, carefully constructed to keep enemies at bay and protect everything inside. From towering walls to secret passageways, these castles were more like living creatures, breathing with history, always on guard, always watching. But we're not in a rush to charge through the battlements. No, tonight is different. This isn't a fast-paced documentary where facts fly at you like arrows from a long bow. Instead, imagine you're nestled inside one of these castles, listening to the wind gently hum through the cracks in the stone, the faint sound of the drawbridge being lowered, the occasional distant clang of metal as the guards change shift. You're not worrying about invaders, you're simply soaking in the peaceful hum of history, a quiet moment before sleep. Medieval castles weren't just military structures. They were homes, places of strategy, but also of comfort. Well, comfort in the medieval sense. You won't find the plush velvet cushions or electric heating of today, but there was a sense of security in knowing you were behind those thick stone walls. The world outside may have been full of danger, but within the castle's embrace, there was a calm. Well, as much calm as you could find in an age of constant tension and uncertainty. This story isn't meant to be a crash course in castle warfare. We're not here to rush through battles, charge into sieges, or dive into gritty details about medieval weaponry, although we'll touch on that, don't worry. Instead, think of this as a gentle walk through history. We're going to explore how castles functioned as defensive fortresses, but in a soothing, slow way, as if you're drifting off into a peaceful slumber. We'll take it step by step, stone by stone, moat by drawbridge. So, as you settle into bed, let the rhythm of this tale lull you into a deeper relaxation, carrying you gently into the world of the past. The clashing of swords. It'll fade into the soft, rhythmic echoes of history, a whisper in the night. Before we continue, take a deep breath. Close your eyes if you wish, and imagine yourself standing in the shadow of a towering castle. Feel the cool stone beneath your feet, the faint smell of damp moss clinging to the walls, and the soft sound of the wind as it brushes past the battlements. The castle is standing guard, silent and steady, its purpose simple: to protect. Now, let's move from the grand exterior to the very heart of the castle itself. As we walk closer, we'll uncover the layers of defense hidden within, the strategic brilliance that went into keeping the castle safe. We'll learn about the walls, the gates, and the towers, not as cold facts, but as living, breathing elements of a fortress that sheltered lives. We'll see how the people who lived within those walls went about their daily lives, ever aware of the threats beyond, but always in the safe embrace of their stone walls. Their world was one of calculated defenses and quiet moments. It was an era of survival, yes, but also of ingenuity and resilience. As we explore how these castles stood strong against invaders, we'll also discover how the design of these buildings was so much more than simple architecture. It was a dance between the harshness of the outside world and the need for safety within. Each stone placed, each wall built, was a testament to human survival, a way of holding on to the hope that, no matter how fierce the storm, these fortresses would stand tall. And with that gentle transition, we'll begin our exploration of the very first line of defense: the walls, the thick, imposing stone barriers that surrounded castles, keeping invaders at bay while offering protection to those inside. So, settle in, let the calm wash over you, and let's wander through the world of medieval castle defense. Let the story unfold, piece by piece, as the night stretches on. Next, we'll explore the fortress's walls, where the battle between safety and invasion begins. What makes a building a castle rather than a simple fortified house or a fort? It's not just the size, though castles do tend to be on the grander side. It's not the luxury either. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Castles weren't about plush velvet curtains or feather beds, even though some may have had a certain grandeur. No, what truly makes a castle is its ability to protect those inside from the chaos of the world outside, turning the structure into a formidable fortress that could withstand attacks from all sides. Imagine standing in front of a castle at sunset. The soft orange and pink hues of the sky reflect off the stone, which is rough and weathered, yet undeniably strong. The imposing stone walls stretch high above, almost as if to say, "Try me." This is no ordinary building. It's a monument to survival, built with one purpose in mind: to defend its inhabitants. But what goes into that design? What makes a castle more than just a home or a fort? At its core, a castle is all about layers of defense. A fortified house may have sturdy walls, but it lacks the depth of strategy and architecture found in a true castle. Castles weren't just built to look imposing. They were built to function as strongholds, designed to keep the dangers of medieval life at bay. So, let's begin by wandering through the elements that make a building a castle, focusing not just on their practical design, but also on the peaceful quiet of a place that was, for its time, a symbol of security. Picture this. You're walking down a long, winding path that leads up to a castle, the kind you've seen in history books and movies. You're greeted by towering stone walls that seem to stretch endlessly toward the sky. These walls aren't just for show. They are the first and most visible defense. They're thick, built from stone, and incredibly tall. Their purpose? To keep invaders out. From the ground, these walls look impenetrable, and for good reason. No battering ram could easily break through this fortress. The walls of a castle were built to withstand assault after assault, ensuring that the people inside had time to respond to threats, whether that meant launching arrows, using boiling water, or simply waiting out the attack until help arrived. Now, imagine yourself inside these walls, looking around. To your right, there's a towering gatehouse, a mighty structure with a sturdy wooden door reinforced with iron. This is the main entry point to the castle. But it's not just any door. This is a gate designed with defense in mind. It's often covered by a drawbridge, which stretches over a deep, wide moat. More on that in a bit. The drawbridge is a clever way to control access to the castle. When invaders approach, the drawbridge can be raised, leaving them stranded on the other side. If the drawbridge is down, guards can carefully watch and control who crosses. As you stroll along the walls, you notice the towers, those towering sentinels that offer a strategic advantage over the surrounding land. These aren't just decorative features, they're essential for spotting danger early. From the top of a tower, you have a perfect view of the horizon, allowing the castle's defenders to spot any approaching armies from miles away. And let's not forget, the higher the tower, the more daunting it looks to any potential invaders. The sight of a tall tower rising above a massive wall sends a clear message. This is not a place you want to mess with. Inside, the layout of the castle isn't just a random arrangement of rooms. No, every room, hallway, and courtyard is designed with security in mind. The keep, the castle's heart, and the most secure part of the structure is often situated at the center, surrounded by layers of protection. This is where the lord and his family would have stayed, safe and sound in their personal sanctuary. Surrounding the keep are additional fortifications, making it nearly impossible to reach without overcoming several defensive obstacles. But castles weren't just about the heavy walls and towering fortifications. There was also a sense of order to the design, a quiet, almost serene order. As much as they were built to keep danger out, they also had to provide a home. The courtyards, though modest by today's standards, were places where life took place. Walking around the castle, you might find children running, animals grazing, and servants going about their duties. The feeling inside the castle might have been calm, despite the fortress-like exterior. There was a rhythm to daily life, a sense of routine, even as the world outside seemed dangerous and unpredictable. Now that we've explored what makes a castle, let's take a step back in time and gently uncover the origins of these mighty structures. Castles didn't just appear overnight. No, they were a product of their time, built during a period of great instability in Europe. They began to rise in the early Middle Ages, around the 9th and 10th centuries, as the need for protection grew more pressing. With constant threats of invasions, whether from Viking raiders, marauding bands, or rival lords, people needed more than just fortified houses to stay safe. They needed places that could stand strong, places that offered safety, security, and a sense of permanence. The first castles were quite simple, often made from wood, but as time passed, they grew larger and more intricate. By the 11th century, stone castles were becoming the norm. They weren't just symbols of power, they were designed for one thing above all else: defense. The more powerful the lord, the bigger and stronger the castle. But, as we know, no fortress is ever completely secure. Even the mightiest castles fell at times. Still, the goal was always the same: to hold off invaders long enough to defend what was inside. Castles became the centers of medieval life, where the protection of the people was paramount. Let's return to the present, stepping gently from the past to the present, and picture what it might be like inside a medieval castle. The air is cool, the stone walls solid and unmoving, and the sounds of distant life echo through the corridors. You've passed through the heavy gates and crossed the drawbridge, and now you stand within the castle's walls. It's quiet here, except for the occasional murmur of the guards, the soft clatter of footsteps across stone floors, and the distant hum of activity within the courtyard. The hallways are dimly lit by torches, their flames flickering in the soft breeze. The smell of fresh bread drifts from the kitchen, and you can hear the sounds of everyday life: the hum of conversation, the clink of metal, the rhythmic movements of people going about their business. But in the corners of your mind, you know that the walls outside are solid, the towers tall, and the gates reinforced. This is a safe place, a world away from the dangers outside. As you stroll deeper into the castle, you might find yourself walking through a large, open great hall, a space where feasts were held, where guests were entertained, and where decisions were made. The stone floors are cool beneath your feet, and the grand fireplace crackles softly at the far end of the room. Tapestries hang on the walls, and large wooden tables are set with hearty meals: roast meats, fresh bread, and stews. The ceiling above is high, with wooden beams stretching across, their dark wood contrasting with the cool, grey stone of the walls. The peace inside the castle is in stark contrast to the turmoil that might be found just beyond the gates. And yet, in this quiet space, there's a sense of power, subtle, unspoken, but undeniable. You're within a structure that has withstood centuries, with walls that have held not just defenders, but lives. So, with that image in mind, let's leave the great hall behind and begin to think about the castle's next line of defense: the moat and the gate. How did the moat function as a protective barrier? What secrets did the gates hold? Let's explore those details next, gently diving into how these defenses created a safe haven within the castle's walls. As we continue our journey through the stone halls of medieval castles, we now stand before the most iconic and formidable feature of these ancient fortresses: the castle walls. Tall, imposing, and seemingly unbreakable, these walls were the first and most vital line of defense. They were the shields of the castle, standing strong and resolute against the battering winds of war and the relentless march of invaders. These aren't just walls. They are living testaments to the skill, strength, and ingenuity of the people who built them. So, let's take a peaceful moment to examine these mighty walls, tall and thick, but also quiet and timeless in their simplicity. Imagine standing at the base of a towering stone wall, looking up at its sheer height. The sky above is a soft, fading blue, and the air feels cool against your skin, as you tilt your head back to take in the full scope of the structure. The walls, towering over you, seem to stretch endlessly into the sky. These are no ordinary walls. They're the stuff of legends, designed not only to keep invaders out, but to send a clear message. This place is not to be trifled with. The sheer thickness of these walls is one of the most remarkable features of any castle. Most medieval castle walls were at least 6 feet thick, but many were even thicker, with some reaching a solid 12 feet or more. That's enough stone to stop a battering ram in its tracks. These walls weren't built with a good enough attitude. No, they were constructed to withstand the heaviest of assaults, whether from weapons, siege engines, or even the sheer weight of time itself. But it wasn't just about how thick the walls were, it was also about how tall they stood. These walls were designed to loom above everything else. The towers they supported often rose to heights of 60 feet or more, which meant that from the top of the wall, defenders could see for miles around, keeping watch for any approaching threat. The height of the wall itself was a deterrent. If you were an invader looking up at a wall that high, you might start to wonder if this was really the best place to storm. Now, let's ease into the feeling of what it must have been like to stand inside the shadow of these walls. The sound of your footsteps on the cobblestone courtyard echoes softly in the still air, and you might feel a faint shiver as the breeze rustles through the gap between the thick stonework. It's not a place where comfort comes easily, but there is a strange peace to the weight of history and the quiet strength of these walls. They stand as silent guardians, unflinching, protecting everything within. The construction of these walls was a feat of incredible craftsmanship. Medieval builders, with their limited tools and resources, were able to create structures that not only served as fortresses, but also as works of art. The materials used to build these walls were chosen for both their strength and their ability to endure the test of time. Stone was the primary material used for the walls of castles, and not just any stone. Builders sought out durable types of rock, often limestone or granite, which were both abundant and tough. The stones were quarried, cut into rough shapes, and then carefully fitted together like a jigsaw puzzle. There were no power tools, no cranes to lift massive blocks into place, just the hands of skilled craftsmen and a lot of sweat. These stones were stacked with precision, each layer building upon the one below it, creating a solid, almost impenetrable structure. But there's more to a castle wall than just stone and mortar. The mortar, the substance that held the stones together, was just as important as the stones themselves. The mortar used in medieval castles was made from a mixture of sand, lime, and water, and it was mixed with great care. Over time, as the mortar set, it hardened into a material as tough as the stone itself. The mix had to be perfect to ensure that the walls would remain sturdy and intact, no matter how many storms or sieges came their way. Beyond the stone and mortar, there was a certain beauty to the walls. The grey and beige hues of the stone were soothing against the backdrop of the green countryside or the blue sky above. As the sunlight changed, so did the walls. In the morning, they glowed a soft golden colour. In the evening, they took on a cooler, almost silver hue, reflecting the colours of the sunset. It's almost peaceful, isn't it? The stone, standing still against time and weather, unchanged by the passage of centuries. These walls weren't just built for protection. They were built with care, with an eye for form and function. As much as they were designed to defend, they were also a part of the landscape, seamlessly blending with the surroundings in a way that suggested balance and harmony, even in the midst of chaos. Now that we've set the scene, Let's think about how these walls functioned during a siege. Imagine it. The sun has barely risen, and the air is thick with the smell of damp earth and stone. You hear the distant sounds of a drum, signaling the approach of an enemy army. As the invaders draw near, they see it. The castle wall, towering above them, blocking their path. The sight alone is enough to make some think twice. It's not just a wall, it's a message. You cannot pass, you cannot break us. The walls were designed to slow down and wear out any would-be attackers, and they did so brilliantly. When invaders attempted to breach the castle, their first move was often to launch siege weapons, like battering rams or catapults. But these walls weren't just made of stone, they were designed with layers of defense. The outer layer might be reinforced with wooden planks or a thick coating of animal hides, further strengthening the stone. In many castles, the walls were angled outward at the bottom, making it harder for attackers to get a good hit with their battering rams. The design was a strategic one, intended to ensure that the defenders had as many advantages as possible. But what about the gates, you ask? Well, even the gates of a castle weren't just simple entrances. They were heavily reinforced with iron, and often they were positioned in a way that made it difficult for invaders to break in without coming under fire from above. The defenders would often use archers or crossbowmen stationed on the towers above to rain down arrows or boiling liquids on any enemies who got too close. Inside the castle, the defenders were always prepared for the worst. If the walls were breached, the keep, the inner sanctum of the castle, was the last line of defense. The keep's walls were often even thicker than the outer walls, making it the most secure place in the entire castle. Inside, you could imagine the people huddled together, waiting, praying, ready to protect what they held dear. In the midst of all this, it's easy to lose sight of the quiet strategy behind the construction. These walls weren't just there to keep people out, they were there to provide hope, to provide safety. As night fell and the sounds of the enemy faded into the distance, the castle walls stood tall, strong and still, offering peace in a world full of uncertainty. There's something peaceful about a castle wall, isn't there? It's a still, unyielding presence in a world that moves so quickly. It doesn't rush, doesn't worry about the passing days. It simply is. And in that quiet existence, there is a lesson for us. The walls of the castle were built not just with strength, but with patience, care, and purpose. They were designed to stand the test of time, and in many ways they have. As we stand here, surrounded by the quiet beauty of these ancient stones, it's easy to see why castles have captured our imaginations for so long. They are not just symbols of power, they are symbols of resilience, of a calm strength that endures through the ages. They remind us that sometimes the most powerful things in life are the ones that stand quietly, holding their ground and offering shelter to those who need it. And as we continue our journey through this castle, let's move beyond the walls and look toward the other defenses that keep the inhabitants safe. The towers, where watchful eyes stand guard over the land. In the next section, we'll climb those towers and see how the strategic placement of these sentinels gave defenders the advantage. It's time to head upwards and explore the view from the top, where every stone in the castle's design has a purpose, and every decision was made with defense in mind. Now that we've strolled around the castle walls, admiring their unyielding strength and timeless beauty, let's take a trip upward, into the towers. These towering sentinels are not just impressive architectural features, but key components in the castle's defense. Imagine yourself stepping into the castle courtyard once more, your eyes lifting to the towering structure above. The stone towers, rising high into the sky, seemed to be part of the very fabric of the castle itself. From their heights, the defenders could see all that lay beyond the walls, keeping a watchful eye on the land around them. Let's take a calm, meandering look at the towers, those watchful eyes in the sky, where strategy and daily life were intertwined in the most serene way. At the heart of every castle stood its towers, rising high, proud, and vigilant. They were far more than just decorative spires reaching up to touch the heavens. Towers served a crucial function as lookout points, providing an elevated position from which to see any approaching danger. Picture yourself climbing the spiral staircase of a tower, the stone cold beneath your feet, the faint echo of each step reverberating as you ascend. As you reach the top, the world opens up before you. The countryside stretches for miles, and you can see the distant movements of the land, the horizon dotted with villages, fields, and forests. The purpose of these high points was clear: visibility. From the tower's perch, a sentry could spot any advancing armies, enemies, or dangers from miles away. It wasn't just about spotting the obvious threats. These towers were also used to detect subtle movements, an unexpected caravan, a band of raiders, or even a lone scout looking for weaknesses in the castle's defenses. The higher the tower, the farther the view. And the farther the view, the better the chance of spotting a threat before it became too close for comfort. This early warning system was essential in the unpredictable world of medieval warfare. A few minutes' warning could make the difference between life and death, between victory and defeat. But there's a peaceful serenity to the role of the tower that we shouldn't overlook. Yes, they were strategically placed for defense, but they also offered a quiet, solitary retreat. From the top of the tower, the world felt different. The sounds of the castle's busy courtyard, the clanging of swords, the chatter of servants, faded away. Up here, you could hear only the whisper of the wind, the rustling of leaves, and the occasional bird's call. From these heights, the life inside the castle and the worries of the outside world felt far removed. It's almost as if the tower offered a quiet moment of peace, where the heavy burden of protection could momentarily be set aside. The towers weren't just places for sentries to watch for invaders. They also served as living quarters for certain members of the castle's inhabitants. Imagine waking up in a small, cozy room at the top of one of these stone structures. The air is crisp, and the light from a small window pours gently into your room, casting soft shadows on the stone floor. Your bed is simple, perhaps a straw mattress, but the view from the window makes it worth the humble accommodations. Looking out, you see the lush green fields, the winding river, and the distant hills rolling into the horizon. It's a view few others get to experience, offering a sense of peace and tranquility that only those who lived in the towers could truly appreciate. While the towers were designed for defense, they also served as homes for those in charge of protecting the castle. The castellan, the castle's chief officer, would often reside in one of the higher towers. From here, he could not only supervise the castle's defenses, but also maintain a calm and collected view of life within the walls. Life in the tower was an interesting balance between the peaceful serenity of a quiet refuge and the constant awareness of the castle's role in protecting its people. But there was more to life in the tower than simply enjoying the view. In these elevated spaces, residents would often engage in quiet reflection, study, or perhaps even practice their swordplay in the castle's private training rooms. Imagine yourself standing by the window, overlooking the courtyard, as the day winds down. The clatter of the blacksmith's forge and the bustle of the castle's staff seem distant from this vantage point. Inside the tower, life is calm and steady, and the castle's protection seems like a natural, comforting presence, like a warm blanket wrapped around the people inside. The space itself was often simple, but that simplicity made it feel like a refuge. The tower rooms would typically have a small fireplace, enough to warm the stone walls during the chill of winter. Wooden beams would stretch across the ceiling, and tapestries would hang along the walls, perhaps depicting family crests, battles won, or mythical creatures that filled the imagination. The towers weren't just places of defense. They were places where people could live, breathe, and find comfort amid the larger chaos of the medieval world. Now, while it's easy to imagine the peace and solitude that living in the tower may have brought, we mustn't forget the strategic brilliance behind these structures. Towers weren't simply built to provide a good view. They were designed to be the castle's line of defense. The height of the tower was a massive advantage during a siege. From above, defenders could launch arrows, hot oil, or even stones down on any enemy attempting to breach the castle walls. The angle of attack from above gave the defenders a much greater chance of hitting their target, while invaders below had no such luxury. It was the perfect defense, a higher ground advantage that made it much harder for attackers to gain any sort of upper hand. In addition to their height, many towers featured arrow slits, narrow openings in the walls where archers could fire without exposing themselves to the enemy. These slits were a clever design, allowing defenders to take cover behind the stone walls while still being able to launch their attacks. From within the tower, an archer could shoot through the narrow slit, hitting an enemy at a distance while staying safe behind the thick protective stone. It's almost peaceful to think of the careful precision required in these moments. Archers quietly pulling their bows and releasing arrows, their focus unwavering as they protected the castle from above. The towers also often contained defensive platforms, which were built with safety in mind. These platforms allowed defenders to move around and get a better angle for their attack, while the sheer height of the tower gave them an elevated position to scout the battlefield. In times of peace, these platforms might have served as quiet, open spaces to take in the view, but during times of conflict, they became essential tools in the defense of the castle. If the worst came to pass, and invaders were successful in breaking through the castle's outer defenses, the tower would be the last line of defense. It was the place to retreat when all else failed. In the event of a siege, the inhabitants would move up into the tower, where they could hold off the enemy for as long as possible. The walls of the tower were usually thicker than the outer walls, providing a much stronger defense. Inside, there would be provisions, food, water, and even weapons, ensuring that the defenders could last long enough to either drive the invaders away or wait for reinforcements. The sense of safety and security provided by these towers was essential, offering hope in the darkest of times. But despite their strategic importance, there was still a certain quiet beauty to these towers. They were places of calm contemplation, peaceful moments of solitude, where life could go on, even amidst the turmoil of medieval warfare. As we leave the towers behind, let's take a moment to reflect on their role within the larger structure of the castle. These towering structures, offering both beauty and protection, stand as symbols of a time when defense and daily life were intertwined in such an elegant way. But even with the towers standing tall, there were other defenses in place to protect the castle. The moat and gate were crucial components of the overall defense strategy. So, let's step back down from the heights of the towers and head toward the castle's entrance, where the next line of defense awaits. As we continue our journey through the castle, we find ourselves standing before one of its most vital, yet vulnerable features: the gate. If the walls of the castle were the strong arms holding everything together, the gate was its vulnerable throat, the one place where invaders might attempt to breach its defenses. Though it was surrounded by stone walls, and sometimes even moats, the gate was always a potential weak point. It's almost poetic, in a way, how the entryway to this fortress, where the castle's life flowed in and out, was also the point of greatest danger. Now, don't be alarmed. While gates might have been vulnerable, they weren't left unprotected. Castle designers knew full well that this was a sensitive spot, and they fortified it with every ounce of ingenuity they could muster. Imagine standing before the massive wooden doors of the gatehouse, looking up at their dark, intimidating presence. There's a slight creak as the wind blows through the narrow gaps in the wood, and the weight of the structure seems to press down on you. But this gate is not just a door. It's a sentinel in its own right, a stout guardian standing between you and the world outside. The gatehouse wasn't simply a door to stroll through. It was a carefully designed structure, full of defenses. At first glance, it might look like a standard door, but on closer inspection, you'd see that it's anything but ordinary. Made from thick, heavy timbers and reinforced with iron, the gates were built to withstand all sorts of assault. Still, even the strongest gates had their vulnerabilities. The main issue with gates is that, well, they had to be passable. You couldn't exactly have a castle without an entrance, right? So, despite the sheer thickness of the timber, gates were the one place where attackers had a clear shot at getting in. A well-aimed battering ram or a sharp swing of an axe could crack or splinter the wood, giving invaders a foot in the door, quite literally. But it wasn't as easy as just slamming into the gate and breaking it down. Castle designers used a variety of clever strategies to make sure that even if the gate were breached, the attackers wouldn't have an easy time getting through. First, the gates were typically built inside a narrow passage called a gatehouse, a small fortress within the fortress. This tight passage would force anyone attempting to break through to focus all their attention on the gate itself, making them easy targets for archers or defenders perched on the walls above. In some castles, the gatehouse would be fortified with heavy iron portcullises, which were massive iron grills that could be dropped down to block the entrance. These portcullises could be raised and lowered with the help of a complex system of pulleys and ropes, making them a tough obstacle for any invader. As an added precaution, the gates themselves were sometimes reinforced with murder holes. Yes, you read that correctly. These were openings in the ceiling of the gatehouse, through which defenders could pour boiling oil, hot sand, or stones onto any attackers below. It wasn't just the gates that could be deadly. It was everything surrounding them. The idea was simple. If the attackers wanted in, they'd have to make it through an entire gauntlet of obstacles. Next, we come to the drawbridge. The drawbridge was one of those ingenious pieces of medieval engineering that's just as fascinating as it is effective. Imagine a bridge that could disappear at the pull of a lever. It's almost like a magic trick, except instead of disappearing into thin air, the drawbridge would slowly rise, pulling itself up from the ground and creating a gap between the castle and the world outside. So how did this remarkable mechanism work? Picture this. The drawbridge was made from large wooden planks, strong enough to support the weight of horses and soldiers as they crossed. These planks were attached to chains or ropes that ran through pulleys housed in towers on either side of the bridge. When the castle's defenders needed to prevent entry, they would pull a lever or turn a wheel, which would raise the bridge, leaving a gap between the castle and the outside world. The mechanism was so clever because it wasn't just about lifting the bridge. It also made sure the bridge was held securely in place, making it impossible for anyone to cross. This raised bridge provided a huge defensive advantage. It wasn't just about keeping enemies out, it also allowed defenders to control the flow of people and supplies into the castle. If you needed to get supplies across the bridge, you'd have to lower it, of course. But once it was raised, the enemy was left stranded on the other side, with no way to get in. The only option they had left was to either wait for the bridge to be lowered or to try their luck at one of the other defenses. Now, as serene as this sounds, imagine the quiet before an attack. It's a calm evening, and the sun sets behind the castle. The drawbridge is down, the sound of the creaking wooden planks filling the air. Suddenly, you hear the distant sound of marching feet. The invaders are here. The defenders rush into position, and the lever is pulled. With a slow, deliberate motion, the drawbridge begins to rise, blocking the only entrance to the castle. From inside the castle, there's a moment of calm, a brief, almost peaceful realization that the defenses are in place, and the castle is safe, for now. With the gate and drawbridge secured, the castle defenders had to think ahead. The entrance wasn't just about keeping people out, it was also about managing who came in. During a siege, the attackers would try everything they could to breach the gate and make their way into the castle. They'd batter it with battering rams, shoot arrows at it, or try to sneak past with scaling ladders to get over the walls. But they had one problem. The gate was protected, not just by strong wood and iron, but by the entire defensive system of the castle. So, let's picture it for a moment. The invaders have brought out their battering rams, hoping to crack open the castle gates. They strike again and again, their rams thudding against the wood with a rhythm that seems almost hypnotic. But the defenders are ready. From the towers above, arrows begin to rain down on the attackers, sending them scurrying for cover. Meanwhile, inside the gatehouse, the defenders are preparing for another round of boiling oil, ready to pour it down the murder holes above the gate. It's a war of patience, of strategy. For every swing of the battering ram, there's an answer from the defenders. For every attempt to breach the gate, there's a response. And in those moments, as the siege continues, it's easy to imagine how time must have felt like it stood still. The night is calm and quiet, broken only by the rhythmic pounding of the ram and the occasional clash of weapons. But inside the castle, there's a sense of peaceful routine, the quiet understanding that the defenses are holding. The defenders remain calm, prepared to act should the gate be breached, knowing that they are not alone. They have the upper hand, whether through the drawbridge, the portcullis, or the gates. They are in control of the situation. However, despite all these defenses, a determined attacker could still find a way in. The key for the defenders was to stay vigilant and prepared, to ensure that if the worst happened, they would have backup plans in place to prevent further invasion. Whether it meant retreating into the keep or using hidden escape routes, the defenders knew that the battle for the castle gates was far from over. As we leave the gates behind, let's take a step back and reflect on what we've learned. The gates and drawbridges of the castle were not just entryways, they were strategic points, each carefully designed to control access to the fortress. They were the castle's throat, the weak spot that was guarded by both force and cunning. But even with these protections in place, the castle still had another line of defense, something far more solid, something that stood tall and unyielding against any enemy. In the next section, we'll explore the moats and ditches, the physical barriers that separated the castle from the outside world, and how they provided yet another layer of protection against invaders. Let's dive into the world of moats and drawbridges, where water and wood worked hand in hand to keep the castle safe. As we continue our peaceful exploration of medieval castles, we now turn our attention to one of the more serene yet effective defences, the moat. Imagine standing before a castle's towering walls, the soft breeze rustling your hair, and your eyes glancing over to a wide, shimmering expanse of water. The moat, an elegant but vital feature, serves as nature's first line of defence, creating a natural barrier between the castle and the outside world. But the moat wasn't just there to look picturesque, it was there to keep invaders at bay, adding a layer of protection that made any approach more difficult and more dangerous. The purpose of a moat was deceptively simple: to make it difficult for attackers to reach the castle walls. Picture this. You've set your sights on the grand fortress, your goal clear in your mind. You're going to breach the walls and claim the castle. But as you march forward, something unexpected happens. You suddenly find yourself standing at the edge of a moat, its still waters stretching out before you like an invisible, unspoken warning. It's not just a pond, it's a water-filled moat, a carefully constructed obstacle designed to thwart any plans of sneaking into the castle unnoticed. The moat was an ideal defense because it slowed down invaders and made them more visible. Anyone who tried to cross the moat would be out in the open, easy targets for defenders perched in the castle towers above. The deep waters of the moat, or the muddy ditch surrounding it, meant that invaders had to find a way around it, and that's no easy task when the walls of the castle loom like silent giants behind it. The moat made sure that any attempted approach would be loud, clumsy, and slow, giving defenders ample time to spot invaders and prepare for action. Think of it like a buffer zone, a pause between the safety of the castle and the unpredictable world beyond. The presence of the moat alone served as a warning. If you had to cross it, you knew you were no longer sneaking in unnoticed. The moat was the first step in a multi-layered defense system that provided the castle with the luxury of time, giving the defenders ample opportunity to act. Now, moats were not all created equal. Some castles boasted the grandeur of water-filled moats, while others relied on the simple effectiveness of dry moats. Each type of moat had its own beauty and purpose, but both were designed with the same goal in mind: making it difficult to approach the castle unnoticed. Water-filled moats, which are the most iconic, are perhaps the most romanticized image of medieval castles. These moats were often fed by nearby rivers or streams, keeping the water level high and preventing invaders from wading through them. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a still, reflective moat, the water shimmering in the moonlight. The tranquil surface betrays the danger beneath. Should an attacker attempt to cross, the deep water would make it nearly impossible to wade across, and boats or bridges would have to be used. But these could easily be spotted by defenders. The sound of a boat creaking against the water, or the sight of a bridge being lowered, was enough to alert the defenders inside. There was also the advantage of visibility. A water-filled moat provided defenders with an open view of the area beyond, making it easier to spot anyone approaching. As the sun set and the castle's inhabitants looked out over the water, there would be no hiding from the defenders' watchful eyes. Whether it was the shimmer of moonlight on the water or the ripples caused by the slightest movement, the moat created a constant visual alarm, making it difficult for invaders to sneak up on the castle. It was the equivalent of trying to tiptoe across a glass floor. You'd be seen. On the other hand, dry moats were just as effective in a different way. These moats were essentially deep ditches, dug into the earth surrounding the castle, and although they lacked water, they made an approach equally difficult. Imagine a deep, muddy trench surrounding the castle, its walls so steep that any invader attempting to climb in would have to deal with a long, exhausting ascent, if they could even manage it at all. Dry moats were designed to hinder both foot soldiers and siege engines, making them a perfect barrier for any would-be invader. While a water-filled moat might have been more dramatic in its defense, dry moats had their own quiet charm. The sharp, angled walls of the ditch created a natural barrier that would slow down attackers, giving defenders time to prepare. The dry moat also allowed for other defenses to be built into it. For instance, wooden palisades could be erected around the edges, adding another layer of defense. Some dry moats even had spikes, pits, or traps at the bottom, making them even more difficult to cross. While the moat itself was a formidable defense, animals and traps sometimes played a surprising role in the castle's protection. Imagine walking along the edge of a moat, the still waters lapping gently at the shore, when suddenly you hear a distant bark. It's the sound of a watchdog, a trained sentinel, whose job it was to keep a close eye on the water's edge and alert the defenders should anyone dare to come near. These dogs were often kept in kennels near the moat, ready to spring into action at the slightest sign of danger. Their sharp, loud barks served as a warning that the castle was under threat. And it wasn't just dogs that had a role to play. Other animals, like geese or even swans, were often used to guard the perimeter of a castle. These creatures might seem calm and serene, gliding effortlessly across the surface of the moat, but in reality, they were often quite territorial. A goose might honk loudly at any strange movement near the water's edge, alerting the defenders long before human eyes could spot the threat. In this way, the moat, alongside these watchful animals, became more than just a natural barrier. It became an active, living defense. Then there were the traps. These could be hidden deep within the moat or its surrounding ditches. Sharp spikes placed under the water's surface, for instance, would catch any invader who attempted to wade across the moat, ensuring they didn't get too far before being dealt with. Some castles even had pitfalls, deep, narrow holes dug around the moat, covered with branches or loose dirt. A well-timed step could send an unwitting invader into a hole, where they would be trapped, helpless, and easily captured by the defenders. These traps weren't just cruel, they were practical. They ensured that anyone attempting to bypass the moat would have to be incredibly careful, knowing that a false move could lead to a painful end. It's almost serene in its simplicity, nature and human ingenuity working together to create a defense system that was both effective and efficient. As we step back from the edge of the moat, we've had a peaceful moment to appreciate the natural defenses that these moats provided. Whether water-filled or dry, the moat served as a key feature in the castle's defensive arsenal, keeping invaders at bay and offering defenders a safe vantage point from which to observe. But even with moats and ditches, the castle needed one final, powerful defense: the keep and defenders. It was the final line of defense, the heart of the castle, where the last stand would take place if all else failed. So let's leave the tranquility of the moat behind and step into the keep, where the ultimate defense awaits. As we continue our journey through the castle, let's step into the heart of its defenses, the people who stayed inside. Behind the thick stone walls and towering gates, it wasn't just the strength of the fortress that kept it safe. It was the determination, skill, and routine of the defenders. The castle was a living, breathing place, and the defenders were its pulse. It's easy to picture the knights in shining armor riding out to battle, their swords gleaming under the sun. But the reality of life inside the castle, especially during a siege, was much quieter, more methodical, and far less glamorous than the legends would have you believe. Yet, it was every bit as important. Let's explore the castle's garrison, the soldiers, knights, and ordinary folk who made sure that the castle stayed safe. The first thing to understand about castle life is that it wasn't just the noble knights or the castle lord's family who made it secure. Sure, the knights were the ones who wore armor and wielded swords, but there were many more people, soldiers, archers, and even humble servants, whose job it was to protect the castle and keep it running smoothly. Picture yourself stepping into the cool, stone-clad courtyard of the castle. The sounds of clanking swords and shields mix with the soft murmur of conversation as soldiers go about their duties. The knights, those heavily armored defenders of the castle, often led the charge in times of battle, but they were just one part of the garrison. Most knights weren't always on the front lines, especially during times of peace. Many spent their time overseeing the training of soldiers or managing the castle's defenses. They held a symbolic and practical role, guardians of the land, but also, in many ways, figures of authority and order. But of course, it wasn't just knights who made up the defenders of the castle. In the shadow of those shining suits of armor were the foot soldiers and archers, men who had been trained to defend the castle in their own unique way. Soldiers and guards patrolled the walls and kept watch over the entrance, alert for any sign of trouble. Imagine them standing vigil at the castle's gates, their eyes scanning the surrounding countryside, their posture stiff and alert, always ready to sound the alarm should an enemy approach. These men had the difficult and often thankless job of keeping watch day and night, ensuring that nothing and no one slipped past unnoticed. Then there were the archers. Archers were the long-range defenders, trained in the art of the bow and arrow. Imagine the stillness of the castle courtyard on a quiet morning, the soft rustling of arrows as they're being drawn from their quivers, the sound of a bowstring snapping as an arrow is let loose in a practiced, almost soothing motion. Archers were essential to a castle's defense, especially when it came to sieges. From their positions on the castle walls, they could shoot at enemies far below, raining arrows down on advancing troops, or more often than not, their arrows would pierce the air silently, striking targets before anyone even knew they were in range. But defending a castle wasn't just about the warriors with swords and bows. There were also stewards, blacksmiths, and servants who kept the castle functioning and, in many cases, prepared the defenders for battle. The steward was responsible for the day-to-day management of the castle, from ensuring the soldiers were properly fed to overseeing the storage of weapons and supplies. Without the steward's careful oversight, the castle would have struggled to maintain the resources needed to withstand a siege. The blacksmith was another crucial figure in the defense of the castle. Imagine the rhythmic sound of the hammer striking the anvil, the warm glow of the forge as weapons were forged and repaired. The blacksmith worked tirelessly, creating and maintaining the tools of war, swords, axes, shields, and armor, all necessary to keep the defenders ready for action. Inside the castle, everyone had a role to play, and the daily life of the defenders was a blend of responsibility and routine. The more routine aspects of castle life may seem mundane compared to the dramatic images of siege warfare, but they were essential to the castle's survival. The routine of the defenders was based on the understanding that the castle was always in a state of readiness. It was not uncommon for the castle's gates to be closed and secured at dusk, with sentries keeping watch throughout the night. Guards, for example, had the responsibility of ensuring that the castle's gates remained impenetrable. They spent hours pacing along the castle walls, their eyes scanning the horizon. It may seem like an uneventful task, but it was crucial. The guards knew the importance of vigilance. After all, if something were to happen during the night, the castle would need to react swiftly. Their role was often solitary, but not necessarily lonely. In many cases, they would exchange quiet conversations with one another as they watched the stars above, as much a part of the castle as the stone walls themselves. Inside the castle, servants and stewards worked behind the scenes to ensure that the castle's daily needs were met. The servants prepared meals for the soldiers, ensured the weapons and armor were properly maintained, and managed the living quarters for those who would spend nights within the castle walls. Imagine the scent of roasting meats, the clink of cooking pots, and the soft murmur of conversation as the men who would later defend the castle sat down for a meal. These quiet moments, though less dramatic than battle, were no less important. They kept the defenders fed and rested, ensuring they were always prepared for whatever came next. And then there were the knights, but not the ones we usually imagine, galloping off into battle with their swords raised. These knights had a daily responsibility to train the soldiers and archers, maintaining the discipline that would be essential in times of need. They also acted as leaders, guiding the garrison with their wisdom and experience. The knights spent much of their time preparing for battle, but also engaging in the routine of castle life, sometimes practicing with their swords, sometimes sitting down with other garrison members to discuss tactics and defense. Though much of this life may seem tranquil or uneventful, there was always an underlying tension, especially when the castle was under siege. Even when things were quiet, the knowledge that danger could arrive at any moment made the defenders' work important. Every day, the castle's defenders lived with a sense of purpose, knowing that their roles, whether glamorous or humble, contributed to the protection of the castle and its inhabitants. The daily life of the castle defenders was not all about the clashing of swords or the firing of arrows. Much of their time was spent in quiet reflection, ensuring everything was in order. Guards and sentries spent time on the walls, alone with their thoughts, yet always alert. Archers, too, often spent their mornings in the practice yard, perfecting their aim. It wasn't all about battle, it was about preparing for it, staying sharp, and understanding the gravity of their roles. Within the castle's walls, life was surprisingly domestic for those living there. Family members of the garrison often lived with the soldiers in the castle. Imagine walking through the castle courtyard, hearing the soft chatter of children playing, the clattering of dishes from the kitchens, and the low murmur of workers completing their daily tasks. It's easy to forget that castles weren't just places of war. They were homes for many who lived inside their walls. Defenders might take solace in these moments of calm, knowing that their families were safe within the castle's stronghold. The daily life was grounded in routine, a serene balance between the need for defense and the necessity of normal life. In the quiet moments before dawn, the defenders would often gather together in small groups, ensuring everything was prepared for the day, a peaceful start to what might become a long and taxing day. As we continue our tranquil exploration of the medieval castle, we come to one of its most essential and dynamic features: the weapons used to protect it. The defenders of a castle weren't only reliant on the sturdy walls or the towering keep. They had a wide variety of weapons at their disposal, from the long-range precision of archers to the more dramatic, earth-shaking power of siege weapons. While most of these defenses were positioned in the background, almost like silent guardians waiting for action, they played a crucial role in holding off invaders who dared to challenge the castle's safety. Let's take a serene journey into the world of castle weaponry, from archers to siege engines, and explore how these tools of war kept the fortress secure. The archers were perhaps the most peaceful warriors of the castle, at least in the way they fought. Rather than rushing headlong into battle, archers and crossbowmen were positioned at the highest points of the castle, using their bows and crossbows to fight off invaders from a safe distance. Imagine yourself standing at the top of the castle's walls, the wind gently tousling your hair, your eyes scanning the horizon below. You have a bow in hand, its string taut with potential, the quiet calm of the castle around you. As you watch the enemy approach, you not only feel the power of your position, but also the calm determination that comes with knowing how well prepared you are for what's coming. The archer's primary role was to keep enemies at bay before they could get too close to the castle walls. These defenders were experts in long-range shooting, able to fire arrows over long distances with precision. From their positions along the ramparts, archers had an unobstructed view of the land around the castle. They could take aim at approaching enemies from a distance, letting loose a volley of arrows before the invaders had a chance to reach the walls. Crossbowmen, on the other hand, were the more forceful cousins of the archers. Their weapons, the crossbow, were more powerful and easier to use, but slower to reload. Imagine the calm but steady rhythm of a crossbowman as they load a bolt into their weapon, the click of the mechanism echoing in the stillness. Crossbows, though slower to fire, were incredibly accurate and could pierce armor, making them valuable during siege battles. Both archers and crossbowmen used their high vantage points to rain down arrows and bolts on the enemy, often taking out targets with surprising efficiency and power. The positioning of these weapons was strategic. The defenders knew that the further away an enemy could be neutralized, the better. By stationing archers and crossbowmen on the highest towers or along the walls, they not only gained an elevated advantage, but also created a vast area to cover. The archers didn't need to face their enemy directly. Instead, they were able to engage with them from a safe distance, shooting with calm and precision while the enemy struggled to reach the castle itself. But of course, if invaders managed to get close to the castle, it wasn't just arrows and bolts that would be fired. The attackers, too, had their weapons, the mighty siege engines that could turn the tide of battle in their favor. These machines were as powerful as they were awe-inspiring. Catapults, trebuchets, and battering rams were some of the most well-known siege weapons, and each one had its own unique role in breaking down the castle's defenses. Catapults were often used to hurl large projectiles at the castle walls, launching them from a distance. Imagine the slow, deliberate process of loading a massive stone into the catapult's arm. With a creaking sound, the arm is pulled back, and then, with a great force, the stone is released, flying through the air with incredible speed. It's a sight to behold, yet as soothing as the sound of it is. Like the gentle swish of a breeze before a storm, it signals the arrival of an impending attack. When the stones hit the castle walls, the impact is jarring, shaking the stone and making defenders brace for the next one. Trebuchets were even more powerful and precise than catapults. These massive machines used a counterweight to launch stones, and when properly calibrated, they could hurl large rocks over the walls with devastating accuracy. Imagine watching as the trebuchet's arm swings forward, sending the stones soaring through the air with a deep whoosh, crashing into the castle's defenses below. The sheer power of the trebuchet was enough to create a terrifying spectacle. It wasn't just the rocks that came flying, it was the force of destruction that would rain down on the castle's walls, threatening to break them apart. Then, of course, there was the battering ram, the machine designed specifically to break down gates. The battering ram wasn't a projectile weapon, but a tool of direct attack. Picture this: a group of attackers shielded beneath a heavy wooden structure, charged towards the castle gate, swinging a large log back and forth with great force. With each swing, the battering ram would strike the gate with a tremendous thud. The rhythmic pounding would reverberate throughout the castle, and the defenders inside would brace themselves, knowing that with each strike, the gate's strength was weakening. While the attackers worked to breach the gates with their siege weapons, the defenders, perched high above, would fire arrows down at them, hoping to slow the progress of the attack. It was a battle of patience and strength, with the sound of clashing metal and the thudding of siege engines filling the air. The defenders, calm and focused, knew that their fortifications would hold, for now. As if the siege weapons weren't enough, defenders also had projectiles and boiling substances to deal with the attackers. The most iconic and terrifying of these defenses was the practice of boiling oil or boiling water. Imagine yourself in the castle, high up in the towers, watching the enemy approach below. The decision has been made. It's time to activate the castle's most feared defense. With careful precision, the defenders pour boiling oil or water from above, using murder holes, small openings in the ceiling through which the liquid could be poured. As the boiling oil splashes onto the attackers below, they scream in agony, forced to retreat from the castle gates. The sheer horror of being doused with boiling oil would send any invader into panic, and the defenders would watch, calm and methodical, as the enemy scattered in retreat. Aside from boiling liquids, defenders also had other projectiles to rain down on the attackers. Rocks were often launched from slings or hurled by hand, creating a barrage of stone and debris. The sounds of these projectiles hitting their targets, sometimes with a sickening thud, were the sounds of defense. And then there were arrows, fired from the archers perched on the walls, their sharp points piercing through the air toward any who dared approach. These projectiles and boiling substances weren't just tools of destruction, they were also the final piece of the castle's defense system. They were the last line of deterrence, making sure that any invader who attempted to scale the walls or breach the gates would meet with swift retaliation. As we walk through the layers of the castle's defenses, we finally arrive at the most intense moment of any castle's life, the siege. A siege was an almost inevitable chapter in the life of a medieval castle, as much a part of its existence as the stone that made up its walls. When the attackers arrived, they didn't simply rush forward in a chaotic frenzy of sword and shield. No, they came with patience, sometimes weeks, months, or even longer, waiting outside the castle walls, testing the defenders' resilience and stamina. As the castle stood firm, locked away in its defensive sanctuary, the attackers' strategy was simple: wait them out. But what exactly happens when a castle is besieged? What happens when all that remains between life and death is a castle's walls, the defenders inside, and the determination of both sides? Let's take a calm journey through the nature of a siege, the life within, and the strategies used by both defenders and attackers to either hold or break the castle. A siege, in its simplest form, is a waiting game, one that requires a great deal of patience from the attackers. It's easy to imagine the dramatic moments of battle, but the true nature of a siege is built on the slow, steady pressure of waiting at the walls. The attackers arrive, their numbers swarming like an ever-growing shadow on the horizon. They set up camp, forming a siege perimeter around the castle, cutting off all means of escape for the defenders. No one could leave to fetch supplies. No messenger could escape to bring reinforcements. All the attackers had to do was surround the castle, biding their time as they slowly starved the defenders of their resources. Life outside the castle was a completely different world from the life inside. As the defenders peered out from the tall, narrow windows of their towers, they could see the attackers moving around in their camps. There was a strange stillness to it. No immediate threats, no clashing swords, but an ever-growing tension that hung in the air. The invaders would set up their siege camp, digging trenches, constructing siege engines, and carefully positioning their forces. It wasn't about making noise or charging forward. It was about creating a blockade that would force the defenders into submission. The attackers knew they had one powerful advantage: time. The idea was simple: cut off supplies, force the defenders into starvation, and wait for them to surrender. This slow, methodical tactic could last for weeks, sometimes even months. While the attackers waited, they kept the castle under constant pressure, knowing that eventually the defenders would run low on food and water. And if the siege dragged on long enough, they might even force the castle's inhabitants to give up, either by starving them out or causing enough mental stress for them to surrender. Inside the castle, life during a siege was far from peaceful. It was quiet, yes, but it was a silence punctuated by the gnawing reality that food, water, and supplies were slowly dwindling. The daily life of defenders during a siege was far less about sword fights and more about rationing food, rationing water, and perhaps most importantly, rationing hope. The defenders knew they had only a limited amount of time before their supplies would run out, and the situation grew more desperate with each passing day. Imagine standing within the walls of the castle, gazing out at the attackers milling about in their camp. The world outside is still, with only the occasional sound of the enemy moving in the distance. Inside, things are quieter still, so much quieter, in fact, that you can almost hear the soft rustle of your own breath, or perhaps the clinking of armor as someone moves through the courtyard. The guards on the walls, watching as the attackers set up their camp, know what's coming. But for now, all they can do is stand watch and wait. Inside the castle, food rationing became the central focus of daily life. The kitchens would prepare meals from whatever scraps were left, making sure that everyone inside had enough to survive each day. But each meal would be smaller, more basic, and a little less satisfying than the one before. Imagine sitting at a long wooden table with your fellow defenders, the smell of stew or bread filling the air, but knowing it's all you'll have for the next several days. There's no more meat to be had. It's mostly grains and vegetables. It's filling, yes, but it doesn't exactly inspire excitement. Yet there's a strange comfort in the knowledge that everyone is in the same boat. There's no extravagance, just the steady, patient act of making do. Water, too, becomes a precious commodity in the midst of a siege. Every drop, once taken for granted, now carries weight and significance. The defenders must ensure that the well doesn't run dry, that there's enough to last for the duration of the siege, whether it lasts weeks, months, or even longer. Water, the very lifeblood of survival, takes on an almost sacred quality. Each sip becomes something to be savored, not wasted. The once casual act of quenching thirst now feels like a deliberate decision, a moment of reflection on how much longer the supply might last. Rationing becomes an art, and the defenders are forced to make difficult choices, knowing that tomorrow might bring the final drop from the well. Every time they take a drink, they'll wonder if they're drinking their last, and if the next person who comes looking for water will be met with empty buckets and dry stone. The pressure of this careful calculation weighs heavily on their minds. It's the constant thought that lingers at the edge of their awareness, the knowledge that they are living on borrowed time. Will the barricades hold, the gates withstand, and the walls remain unbreached long enough to see the end of this terrible waiting game? And if the worst happens, if the invaders break through, Will there be enough to last them long enough to fight their way out, or to simply survive another day? The defenders can only hope for the best and prepare for the worst. As the days stretch into weeks and the siege drags on, the stress of waiting wears on everyone's nerves. The once quiet, peaceful moments grow scarcer, slowly replaced by the constant gnawing of anxiety, the pressure of not knowing when the inevitable clash will come. The longer the siege lasts, the more the walls seem to close in, and the defenders feel the weight of uncertainty pressing down on them. The calm moments of routine, the shifts changing, the archers practicing on the walls, the knights coordinating strategies, become more ritualistic than comforting. The men and women within the walls begin to rely on the security of routine as a coping mechanism. Their lives become smaller, more contained, each moment devoted to the simple tasks of survival and keeping the siege at bay. But beneath the monotony of the day-to-day, there is always the underlying tension, the quiet anticipation that at some point the defenders will be forced to act. The calm before the storm becomes not only a companion, but a constant reminder that they must be prepared for whatever comes next. In these quieter moments, the defenders have to find solace in routine, guards rotating shifts, archers perfecting their aim, knights overseeing the readiness of the castle's defenses. There's a certain peace in the knowledge that the walls are still standing, that the gate still holds, that for now the attackers remain outside. But there's also a deep-seated nervousness that lurks behind every action. Each carefully maintained routine is a preparation for the inevitable confrontation that may come at any moment. Every step, every move is part of a larger plan for survival. Still, with every passing day, the clock is ticking down, and the defenders know that the longer the siege stretches on, the more the castle's resources will dwindle, the more hope will fade, and the calm will shatter when the final attack begins. In a way, the defenders of the castle live in two realities. One, where they hold steady in their positions, keeping watch over the world they're trying to protect, and another, where they know that they're simply biding time, waiting for the inevitable clash that may come at any moment. The peace of the moment is fleeting, interrupted by moments of fear and exhaustion, all while the invaders grow more desperate outside. But even in the thick of waiting, the defenders continue to stand tall, ready for whatever comes next, whether it's the final assault, a desperate last stand, or the breathless relief that only comes when the siege is finally lifted. And so, each day feels like a delicate balance between endurance and action, where the calm before the storm is both a comfort and a challenge, a reminder that the storm is coming, but not yet here. But the attackers were not idle. Just as the defenders waited and rationed, the invaders were also engaged in their own tactical preparations, trying to outwit and outlast the castle's defenses. The longer the siege went on, the more creative the attackers became, constantly testing the strength of the castle's walls and finding ways to break through. One of the most common tactics used by attackers during a siege was tunneling. Attackers would dig tunnels under the castle walls in an effort to undermine their foundations. These tunnels were typically dug at night to avoid being spotted by the defenders, and the goal was simple: to collapse the walls from below. Imagine the quiet of a moonlit night, the sound of pickaxes softly striking stone as the attackers work in the dark. The tunnelers knew that if they could get far enough under the walls, they could cause them to collapse, opening a path for the rest of the attackers to pour into the castle. Other tactics included starving out the defenders. The attackers would try to block any supply routes, cutting off all access to food, water, and reinforcements. For the defenders inside the castle, this would mean a gradual wearing down of their strength The longer the siege lasted, the less energy the defenders would have to fight back, and the more desperate their situation would become. Disease could also spread rapidly during a siege, especially if the defenders were packed tightly into the castle. The unsanitary conditions and close quarters would make it easier for sickness to spread, further weakening the defenders' resolve. But the attackers didn't just sit idly by while waiting for the castle to surrender. They used their siege engines, catapults, trebuchets, and battering rams to chip away at the castle's defenses. These weapons were used not only to breach the castle walls, but also to demoralize the defenders, creating a psychological pressure that matched the physical one. The sound of rocks or flaming projectiles hitting the castle would have been both terrifying and maddening for the defenders, who could only watch and wait for the impact. As we continue our peaceful exploration of the inner workings of a medieval castle, we now come to one of its most intriguing and hidden features: the secret passages and hidden doors. These concealed pathways were often the unsung heroes of the castle's defense strategy, allowing both escape routes for those trapped inside and surprise attacks on unsuspecting invaders. Imagine wandering through the castle's shadowy corridors, the sound of your footsteps muffled by the thick stone walls, knowing that these hidden routes could mean the difference between life and death in times of siege. Let's take a calm and serene journey through these secret passages, marveling at the quiet ingenuity that lay beneath the surface of the fortress. Imagine the tension inside the castle during a siege, the weight of the heavy walls pressing down on you as you wait, uncertain, in the high tower. The attackers have encircled the stronghold, and all of the castle's entrances are tightly secured. But amid the fortress's sturdy stone walls and ramparts, there is something else, something quietly hidden, a secret passage. The importance of these passages cannot be understated. Castles were not just defensive structures, they were also homes for nobility, places where families lived and conducted business. But when the castle came under siege or threat, survival was paramount. Secret passages offered a hidden escape from danger. For the defenders, these secret routes could provide a way out if the castle's walls were breached, or if the gates were too compromised to pass through. For the attackers, these passages posed an entirely different challenge, a way for the defenders to surprise them or escape capture at the most unexpected moments. In times of siege, the defenders inside the castle were often cut off from the outside world. Communication was limited, and reinforcements were unlikely to arrive. For the castle's inhabitants, the thought of being trapped with no way out could be suffocating. But secret passages allowed for a degree of hope, hidden routes snaking their way through the castle's thick walls, leading to safe ground or, at the very least, offering a way to regroup in case of a dire situation. These passages weren't always large or obvious. Many of them were narrow, winding tunnels barely wide enough to fit a person, hidden behind movable panels or beneath floorboards. The design was subtle, almost artistic in its simplicity. A hidden door might blend seamlessly with the surrounding stonework, so much so that a casual observer would never suspect its existence. And yet, to those in the know, it was a secret passage to safety, or, if needed, an unexpected way to sneak up on attackers. The sheer cleverness of these secret passages was enough to instill a sense of calm in the defenders. Imagine walking quietly through one of these hidden corridors, the soft echo of your footsteps muted by centuries of history. The air is cooler here, the stone walls rough against your fingertips. Every corner might lead to another hidden door, or an escape route that could carry you to safety, if only you knew the right way. As we quietly traverse the secret passages of the castle, We must also take a moment to appreciate the calm ingenuity with which these hidden doors were crafted. These doors weren't like the main gates, designed to withstand battering rams and the chaos of siege warfare. They were subtle and quiet, almost as if they existed in the same breath as the castle itself. Unassuming, almost invisible. Imagine you are one of the defenders during a tense moment. You've seen the attackers break through the outer walls, and the castle is no longer safe. But rather than surrendering, you step towards a hidden door, your hand brushing over the stone surface that blends so perfectly with the rest of the wall. There's no grand flourish, no dramatic moments, just a quiet click, and you are inside the secret passage, moving with a sense of calm urgency as you seek refuge. These escape routes were critical for keeping the defenders one step ahead of the attackers. Whether for quick retreats or repositioning, they allowed the defenders to move unseen and potentially surprise the attackers with counterattacks. For the attackers, this constant sense of being watched, of never knowing where the defenders might pop up next, was unsettling. These hidden doors gave the defenders a tactical advantage, turning the castle's defenses into a labyrinth of possibility. The use of hidden doors wasn't limited to just escape. They were also used for surprise attacks. If the defenders could sneak through a secret passage to outflank the invaders, they would catch them off guard, launching attacks from unexpected angles. It was almost like a game of chess. Each move calculated, each hidden doorway a potential game changer. The peaceful routine of castle life suddenly turned into a calculated war of quiet deception, where each step taken in the shadows could lead to a strategic advantage. Imagine the silence of one of these surprise moments. The stillness inside the passage, broken only by the soft sound of footsteps, as defenders moved unseen and prepared for the right moment to burst out. The attackers, focused on the obvious entrances, had no idea that they were being watched from every corner. The defenders were not passive. They were quiet, calm, and ready to strike when the time was right. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of a castle's secret passages were the mysterious tunnels that lay beneath its foundations. These tunnels often ran deep underground, hidden from sight, connecting the castle to places of importance, like the nearby village or forest. Some tunnels even led to water sources or other remote areas where supply lines could be maintained during a siege. The idea of wandering through these tunnels today evokes a certain serenity, as if the very earth itself holds secrets that have been buried for centuries. Picture yourself standing in the cool, shadowy entrance of a mysterious tunnel, the stone walls damp with age. The air is musty, thick with the scent of earth and time, and the flickering light from your torch casts long shadows down the corridor. As you step forward, the sound of your footsteps echoes softly in the stillness, and the silence around you is almost overwhelming. These tunnels, hidden for centuries, were made for the most peaceful purposes: to escape, to protect, to move unseen. As you walk deeper into the tunnel, you begin to feel the weight of history pressing in on you. The coolness of the stone and the quietness of the passage create an almost meditative atmosphere. Every step forward is like stepping back in time, with each turn in the tunnel leading you to new and hidden corners of the castle that were designed to keep the defenders safe. The beauty of these tunnels was not in their grandiosity, but in their subtle strength. They were crafted to ensure that the castle's defenders had the upper hand, even when it seemed like all was lost. As we journey deeper into the heart of the castle, we come to the most critical part of any medieval stronghold: the keep. The keep was the last line of defense, the final sanctuary where the castle's most important inhabitants took refuge when everything else had failed. It was a structure within a structure, an unyielding fortress inside a fortress, designed to withstand the harshest of attacks. The moment the attackers breached the outer walls and gates, the keep became the place where the Lord, his family, and all those important enough to be inside could make their stand. But while its purpose was defense, life inside the keep was often quieter, more peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding just outside its walls. Let's take a serene and calming stroll through the castle keep, a place of safety and last-minute resilience, and explore both the role it played and the life that unfolded within its secure embrace. Imagine the castle as a giant layered cake, with the outer walls and towers serving as the thick outer icing, protecting the inner sweetness of the fortress. At the very center of this cake lies the keep, a solid core of stone and history. It was the castle's ultimate stronghold, the stronghold within a stronghold, built to resist anything the attackers could throw at it. If the outer defenses of the castle were breached, or if siege tactics began to take their toll, the keep was where the last stand would be made. The keep, with its high, thick walls and strategic positioning, was almost impregnable. It was designed to be the final place of retreat when all else failed. Imagine it towering above the rest of the castle, standing proud like an ancient sentinel. Its fortified walls were built to withstand battering rams, arrows, and even siege weapons. With narrow windows, crenellated walls, and perhaps even a moat surrounding it, the keep was designed to keep invaders at bay, no matter how persistent they might be. But the keep wasn't just a symbol of military strength. It was also a home, the place where the Lord, his family, and important members of the court would retreat to when the castle came under threat. Inside, the walls were lined with tapestries, and flickering torches provided warmth against the cold stone. It wasn't just an austere military bastion. It was a place where the people of the castle could find solace amidst the storm of battle. Life inside the keep was markedly different from the frantic energy of the outer walls. Inside, there was order and calm, with soft hearths crackling and food being prepared. While soldiers stood watch on the outer battlements, inside the keep, life was focused on preserving the last remnants of civilization in the midst of chaos. The lord of the castle and his family lived in the heart of the keep, often in a large, well-appointed great hall. Picture yourself stepping into the hall, a vast open space with a high wooden ceiling, beams stretching overhead like the ribs of a great ship. The flickering light of torches dances across the stone walls, and the smell of roasting meat and fresh bread fills the air. The Lord would sit at the head of a long wooden table, surrounded by his family and trusted advisors. This was a space for eating, meeting, and even sleeping at times of siege. The Lord's quarters, tucked away on a higher floor, were a little more private. They were often more comfortable than the rest of the castle, though by modern standards, they were still relatively humble. The Lord's bed would be the focal point, a four-poster with a thick woolen coverlet to keep the cold at bay. A large stone fireplace crackled nearby, and tapestries adorned the walls, depicting scenes of battle, nature, and family history. Despite the harshness of the times, this was as close to comfort as a medieval noble would get. In addition to the Lord's family, the keep also housed important people, knights, loyal retainers, and high-ranking officials who had been granted sanctuary. It was a calm refuge, where the important matters of the castle's survival could be discussed behind thick stone walls, away from the ears of the enemy. while soldiers stood ready for action on the castle's walls. Inside, the day-to-day activities of survival took on a more serene rhythm. The kitchen inside the keep would often be the busiest place, as the cooks worked to prepare enough food to sustain the defenders during a prolonged siege. Imagine the aroma of freshly baked bread, simmering stews, and roasting meats wafting through the air. The kitchen was a flurry of activity, where life inside the keep, despite the danger outside, continued with a sense of calm and purpose. Though the keep was built for security, it was also a home. It was the place where families were protected, and where the castle's nobility would sleep at night, untroubled by the concerns of the outer world. Windows inside the keep were narrow slits, offering little more than a glimpse of the world outside, just enough to see any movement near the castle walls. These windows were designed for defense, not for comfort, but they still allowed the inhabitants of the keep to look out at the siege or at the daily bustle of castle life. When we think of a medieval castle, we often think of towers and moats, but the keep stood as the most secure part of the entire fortress. If the outer walls were breached and the invaders made their way inside the outer courtyard, the keep was where the last line of defense was drawn. The thick stone walls of the keep were designed to resist attacks. No battering ram could break through them easily, and the high vantage points allowed the defenders inside to observe any movement below. There were likely stone stairs that spiraled up to the higher levels of the keep, offering extra layers of defense, a safe place to retreat in case the battle outside became too dangerous. The doors to the keep were reinforced with iron, making them virtually impenetrable. These sturdy doors could be locked from the inside, ensuring that only those with the right key or permission could enter. If the attackers had reached the keep, the people inside could pull up the drawbridge or seal the portcullis, blocking off all access. The high walls of the keep were its best defense. The keep's battlements, with their parapets and crenellations, provided excellent places to defend against invaders, and they also allowed for easy observation of any approaching threats. Inside the keep, archers and crossbowmen would have the advantage, with their elevated positions, giving them an unobstructed view of the battlefield. In the event of a breach, the keep was designed to be a self-sustaining stronghold. It was built to last for months during a siege, with a well or water source inside to provide fresh water, and its storerooms stocked with supplies. The keep was a place of endurance, where the defenders could hold out as long as necessary, hoping for reinforcements or a break in the siege. Though the keep's main purpose was to protect the most important people in the castle, it was also a symbol of the castle's resilience. When everything else had been overwhelmed, the keep stood as the final bastion, a silent witness to the bravery of those who defended it. As we conclude our peaceful exploration of the castle keep, we've seen how this stronghold within a stronghold served as both a defensive fortress and a peaceful refuge. In the face of attack, it was where the castle's nobility found solace amidst the chaos, and where defenders could hold their ground against impossible odds. It was a place of safety, resilience, and endurance, where time seemed to move more slowly, even as the battle raged outside. But as we leave the keep and step back from the battlements, we find ourselves at the end of our journey through the castle's defences. The life inside the castle, though marked by danger and uncertainty, was also shaped by a peaceful strength, the kind of quiet determination that made castles such a symbol of both security and resilience in the medieval world. So, as we drift through the serene and mighty structures of medieval castles, we come to a quiet reflection on the changing tides of war. Castles, those magnificent fortresses of stone and strength, were built to withstand the most brutal of assaults. But as the centuries passed, the world around them, especially the nature of warfare, began to evolve. The clamor of battlefields shifted, and with it, the very strategies that had made castles such strongholds of power and protection. Let's take a peaceful journey through this transformation, gently observing how new threats emerged and how castles adapted to meet them. As we step back through time, we'll come to a calm understanding of how this era, so deeply rooted in fortified defenses, slowly gave way to a new kind of warfare, and with it, the decline of castles as the ultimate symbol of defense. The medieval period was a time of evolving military tactics and shifting power dynamics, each change influencing the way castles were designed and defended. Initially, castles were built with one primary purpose in mind: defense. Walls, moats, towers, and gates were all constructed to thwart enemy advances, creating a formidable barrier against invaders. But as the centuries passed, the nature of warfare itself began to change. At the start of the medieval period, warfare was often about siege tactics, slow, methodical approaches to wearing down the defenses of castles. Invaders used battering rams, siege towers, and trebuchets to break through the walls, while defenders relied on archers, crossbows, and boiling oil to fend off attackers. Castles adapted by creating stronger walls, multiple layers of defense, and secret passages to escape or surprise enemies. It was a battle of endurance, where time, patience, and strategy played a crucial role in determining the outcome. But as time passed, new technologies began to shape the battlefield in unexpected ways. Gunpowder was introduced to Europe, and with it came a drastic change in how warfare was conducted. Slowly but surely, the once invincible walls of the castles started to show signs of weakness. As gunpowder-based weapons like cannons and firearms became more prominent, the old ways of siege warfare no longer held the same effectiveness. The sound of gunfire replaced the clanging of swords, and the roar of cannons echoed across the battlefield. Castles, which had once been the heart of a kingdom's defense, began to look vulnerable against this new form of attack. Imagine, for a moment, the calm before the storm as these new weapons began to emerge. The defenders of the castle, once so secure behind their thick stone walls, now found themselves facing an entirely different kind of threat. The fortress that had once been their greatest strength began to show signs of weakness. Yet, despite this growing tension, the castle wasn't going to surrender quietly. It adapted, it changed, just as the tides of warfare changed around it. One of the most significant threats to the castle's defense came from an unlikely source: gunpowder. While initially used in small ways, gunpowder slowly became the key to transforming the face of war. By the late medieval period, cannons, large, gunpowder-powered weapons, began to make their presence felt on the battlefield. These cannons could fire heavy projectiles capable of shattering walls and causing irreparable damage to the castle's once impregnable fortifications. The introduction of these massive weapons heralded a new era in castle defense. Castles, which had once been protected by thick stone walls, were now vulnerable to the power of cannon fire. As cannons became more powerful and accurate, the importance of the castle's walls began to diminish. What had once been a formidable defense against arrows, siege weapons, and battering rams was now easily compromised by the sheer firepower of these new weapons. Yet, the castle didn't just give up. Castle designers and defenders started to adapt. They began to rethink the designs of their walls, opting for thicker and lower walls that were less likely to be toppled by cannon fire. Some castles even started incorporating earthworks or bastions, mounds of earth or angled walls, designed to deflect cannonballs away from the stone structures. Despite these efforts, the castle's days as the ultimate symbol of military power were numbered. Gunpowder had begun to tilt the balance of power away from the fortress and toward a new era of firepower and firearms. As gunpowder and cannons grew in prominence, the role of the castle as a defensive structure started to fade. Castles, once the epitome of military strength and fortified protection, began to lose their luster as the ultimate defense. Their towering walls and thick stone gates, which had once seemed impenetrable, now appeared increasingly outdated in the face of new technology. But, even in its decline, the castle had a certain quiet grace. As gunpowder became more common, castles began to transform from military fortresses to residences. The once bustling garrisons and ramparts gave way to peaceful courtyards and expansive halls. The walls that had withstood countless sieges were now simply witnesses to the passing of time. The world around them was changing, and so were the castles. Their heavy, battle-tested exteriors now stood as historical relics, remnants of an age that had passed into the annals of time. In a peaceful way, the castle's role in warfare was replaced by the development of modern artillery and fortified military installations. The age of the castle as a stronghold had reached its quiet conclusion. Castles, once the symbols of power and military dominance, now found themselves eclipsed by the age of gunpowder and firearms. But even as the castle began to fade from the stage of warfare, it was not entirely forgotten. Its legacy lived on, influencing the design of military forts and defensive structures for centuries to come. The castle had evolved with the times, and as its role in warfare diminished, it transitioned into a symbol of history and romance. Though the medieval castle's time as a fortress came to a peaceful end, its legacy still lingers in the world today. As we leave behind the turbulent world of sieges and battles, we now find ourselves in the quiet realm of reflection, the legacy of medieval castles. These magnificent structures, once the seat of power and defense, now stand as historical landmarks, silent witnesses to an era long past. Today, castles are no longer used for military defense or the fierce protection of lords and families. Instead, they have found a new purpose: to teach, to inspire, and to captivate our imaginations. They stand proudly in the modern world, offering us a window into the past and providing us with invaluable lessons about design, resilience, and adaptability. So, let's take a calm, peaceful walk through time and reflect on how these iconic structures continue to shape our world and what we can learn from them. Castles, with their towering stone walls, imposing gates, and intricate fortifications, have become some of the most recognized and beloved structures in the world. Today, they are not just remnants of a bygone age. They are historical landmarks, standing as proud symbols of medieval history, architecture, and culture. Whether perched on a hilltop overlooking a lush valley or nestled beside a winding river, these castles continue to attract millions of visitors each year, tourists, history enthusiasts, and dreamers alike. These castles, once bustling with activity, now serve as time capsules, preserving the stories of knights, kings, queens, and battles fought long ago. As we stroll through these majestic buildings, we are transported to another time, a time of feudal systems, chivalric codes, and medieval battles. The rooms, towers, and walls that once protected their inhabitants now tell the stories of those who lived there, the noble families, the soldiers, and the servants who spent their lives in these fortified walls. and while their military function may have faded, their historical significance remains. Castles are no longer fortresses of defense, but monuments to human ingenuity, strength, and the passage of time. In today's world, castles also serve as cultural treasures, often housing museums, galleries, and collections of artifacts that provide us with a deeper understanding of the past. The stone and timber of these buildings have weathered centuries, and as we stand before them, we can feel the weight of history pressing gently on our shoulders. They are not merely buildings. They are living reminders of a time when the world was defined by siege engines, sword fights, and the pursuit of power. Beyond their historical significance, medieval castles offer us timeless lessons in defense and design, lessons that still hold relevance today. Let's take a peaceful moment to reflect on the innovative strategies that made these castles such formidable structures and what we can learn from them. The first lesson we can glean from the castles of the past is the importance of adaptability. Castles were constantly evolving, adapting to the ever-changing threats of their time. The designs of these fortresses, whether it was the thick walls, the moats, or the towers, were all created with one goal in mind: to ensure the safety of their inhabitants. But castles were not static structures. Over time, they were modified, with new features added as technologies and warfare changed. Gunpowder and cannons, for instance, led to the creation of lower walls and earthworks to protect against the new, more powerful weapons. The lesson here? Adaptability is key. As the world changes, so must our approach to defense and protection. Whether in architecture, business, or personal growth, the ability to adapt to new challenges is crucial. Another lesson we can learn from castles is the importance of strategic design. Castles were not just designed for beauty or luxury, they were meticulously planned to maximize security. The placement of towers and gates, the construction of thick walls and narrow windows, and the creation of secret passages were all deliberate choices, designed to make the castle as defensible as possible. Good design isn't just about aesthetics, it's about creating something that functions well and meets its intended purpose. We can apply this lesson in many areas of life, whether it's in the design of buildings, systems, or even the way we organize our daily routines. Careful thought and purposeful design can lead to greater efficiency and security. The moats surrounding castles serve as another example of how castles incorporated nature into their defenses. Water-filled moats were an excellent way to hinder the movement of invaders, while also providing a natural barrier that attackers couldn't easily bypass. Even in the most modern designs, we see echoes of this natural integration, whether in the use of landscaping, water features, or sustainable design. Nature continues to offer solutions for today's challenges. Castles teach us the power of thinking outside the box and using the environment to our advantage. It's easy to see why medieval castles continue to capture our imaginations. From their towering stone walls to their mysterious towers and hidden passages, castles embody a sense of mystery, adventure, and romance that never fails to captivate us. Perhaps it's the sheer grandeur of these fortresses, or maybe it's the mystique of the people who lived and fought there. Whatever the reason, castles hold a special place in our collective imagination, and their appeal endures even in the modern age. There's something inherently romantic about castles. The idea of a brave knight defending his home, a princess gazing out from her tower, or a lord holding court in the Great Hall. Even in their decline, castles remain a symbol of strength and resilience, and they continue to inspire stories, films, and dreams. Whether it's the darkened corners of the castle's dungeons, or the grand banquet halls where feasts were held, There's a sense of wonder that we can't help but be drawn to. These castles represent an era where every stone told a story, and every tower had a secret. Even in their silence, they continue to speak to us, evoking feelings of mystery and history. It's also important to acknowledge that, as tourist attractions, castles continue to serve as a bridge between the past and the present. They are places where we can connect with history, and in doing so, gain a greater understanding of ourselves and the world around us. Standing in the shadow of a castle, one can't help but wonder about the lives that unfolded within its walls. The lords and ladies, the soldiers and servants, the battles fought and won, the marriages arranged, and the alliances forged. It all feels so far away, yet so close. As we gently close the heavy wooden door of the castle and step into the modern world, we reflect on the legacy these incredible structures have left behind. The castles of medieval times have transformed from military fortresses into symbols of history, design, and culture. They have adapted to the changing tides of warfare and time, becoming cherished landmarks that continue to teach and inspire. As we move forward, let us carry with us the lessons of adaptability, design, and resilience that we learn from these grand stone structures. Castles may no longer stand as symbols of military might, but their enduring appeal ensures they will always hold a special place in our hearts, minds, and dreams. As we leave this chapter of history behind, we look ahead to a world where the strength of the past continues to shape our future. As we approach the gentle conclusion of our journey through the majestic medieval castles, let us take a quiet moment to reflect on the calm strength and resilience that these incredible structures embody. Built to withstand the fiercest of assaults, castles were designed to endure, their stone walls standing tall through the ages, weathering time and conflict with grace. But now, as we leave the days of sieges and battles behind, castles have evolved into symbols of something much more peaceful, history and enduring strength. While their walls once echoed with the clash of swords and the calls of battle, today they resonate with a quieter sound, a sound of reflection, admiration, and even peace. They stand as monumental reminders of a past that shaped the world we know today, their towers and gateways inviting us to pause and look back. They were not just built for defense, but for legacy, leaving behind stories that continue to captivate our hearts and minds. Castles have become peaceful, enduring symbols of human ingenuity and the unbreakable spirit of those who built them. Though they were once built for war, today they stand as witnesses to a much gentler time, a time for us to appreciate history, design, and the quiet beauty that still lingers in their walls. Now, as the day fades into night and the world around us softens, we invite you to relax, allowing your mind to gently wander through the peaceful beauty of these ancient strongholds. Picture yourself walking through the quiet halls of a castle, where the only sounds are the faint whispers of history and the soft rustling of the breeze through the old stone walls. Feel the stillness of the castle grounds, the serenity of its gardens, and the sense of peace that now inhabits these once formidable fortresses. There is no rush, no urgency, only the calm beauty of the past unfolding before you. As you drift further into this peaceful reflection, let your mind relax into the quiet strength of these structures, where every stone tells a story of endurance and resilience. The once bustling castles, filled with the sounds of soldiers and nobles, now offer us a peaceful moment to appreciate the beauty of their architecture and the stories they still hold. Let the stillness of the castle towers and the gentle sway of the drawbridges carry you into a peaceful sleep, where history and beauty blend into one soothing, silent landscape. And as the quiet night wraps around you like the thick stone walls of a castle, remember, castles may have been built to protect against the fiercest of enemies, but now they offer us a refuge of peace and solace, a place to rest and reflect. Let their timeless strength and grace guide you into a peaceful slumber, where dreams drift like the soft whispers of the past, carrying you into a world of calm and quiet beauty. As you settle deeper into rest, may the stories of medieval castles and their silent, enduring strength continue to linger in your thoughts, just like the gentle echoes of a bygone era. When you tuck yourself into bed tonight, surrounded by warmth and comfort, take a moment to think about the medieval castles that have stood the test of time. These grand fortresses, once designed to defend against fierce invaders, now stand as symbols of resilience, adaptability, and quiet strength. Their legacy continues to teach us valuable lessons about defense, design, and the importance of peaceful endurance. It wasn't always easy, but they held strong, and for that, we owe them a great deal. Hey, thanks for walking these ancient paths with me. If this tale stirred your spirit, share your favorite legend in the comments. To hear more forgotten stories of old, click on the left. And don't forget to subscribe so our next journey finds you. Rest well, and may the echoes of the past guard your dreams.